this is my second take of this video, because in the first video I messed up all the time because I have a dog barking, like it's a neighbor's dog barking in background, and it's just pissing me off. I can't focus, so I might basically lag a little bit. So in this video I'm going to talk about how to create textures for models, or maps is pretty much the same thing. So there's two methods to create VTF textures. One is not using Photoshop plugin. You basically use VTF edit to convert all the textures from their raw format, like JPEG, PNG, TGA, whatever. And then there's second method, VTF Photoshop plugin, which allows you to save textures in the Photoshop straight to VTF file, which is a bit quicker, to be honest. I prefer this method. I hate this method, to be honest, but I'll go through it anyway, so I'll start with it. So to start making texture, you need to go and actually get the texture itself. I usually use cgtextures.com. Many people use this because it has huge library of free textures. As you can see, brick, concrete, doors, fabric, floors, food, ground, grunge, plaster, paper, plastic, metal, whatever. So for the sake of this tutorial I'll be using brick, modern, let's pick clean, whatever. Yeah. Now CG Textures allows you to select, well, sorry, not select, but download multiple sizes, but you need to be premium member. But for Source Engine, ideal texture size is 512 by 512, so this is fine for us. Actually, I think Source Engine doesn't handle anything higher than 2048 textures. I'm not sure, I'll have to check on that. So if you, like, for example, you want this texture, you should ideally look for tiled. You can see 3D tiling preview. Ah yeah, nice one. Well, you can test it out anyway yourself. So just press on this, small, it's fine, save. Okay, we can close this. Video interiors, raw textures, yeah, brick small. Next thing we need to do is scale it down. See, the resolution is 700 by 700. The Source Engine only accepts the power of 2, so 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 48. Oh no, sorry, not 48, 64, 128, 256, 512, and 1024. Yeah, I'm really bad at maths, to be honest. So next thing. Oh, sorry, I'm just getting mixed up. So just open Photoshop or any other editing software you use. Could be GIMP, Photoshop, I don't know. You could probably even use MS Paint, I think. So just drag it in. Image size 512. Yes, that's fine. Saved. You can just make adjustments. So contrast or brightness. Let's make it a bit more contrast, a bit darker. That's fine. File, save as, video materials. Yeah, another thing I wanted to mention is, oh, actually, one second, I'm gonna mention it later on. Yeah, save. So we have raw texture ready. Go to VTF edit, file, import, find your texture. These are settings for compressions and quality. Usually you should just leave them default unless you know what you're doing, because you could set up the texture so badly that it's going to be huge in size and really bad in quality. So you should just leave it as it is, to be honest. I always do that and never had a problem. So once it's imported, file, save as. Now the thing I wanted to mention is, you can basically, well, how do I put this? Okay, I'm gonna basically create a folder structure, which I always use for modeling, which is straight prepared for Gmod. So you can use the textures like in the 3ds Max, and then you can use them straight away in Gmod with no need to create folders, subfolders, redirections, all that shit. So materials, that's gonna be put, this folder is gonna be put into Gmod root directory. Inside that I'm gonna create my own folder called ALS, it's my initials, and model name for what I'm gonna be using. So just in case you have, I don't know, 50 models in future, so you have separate folders for every model and not just this big long list of textures. So example model, yes, saved, brick 01, that's it, that's fine. Next thing we need to do is create VMT file, which basically, well, there's two files at bare minimum to create a texture: VTF, which is the texture itself, and VMT, which describes the texture, how it's going to be performed or rendered in the game. So if you ever saw textures having bump maps being a bit shiny or more shiny or whatever, that's going to be set in VMT file. Basically the way they're called is VTF files are just raw textures. It's just Valve format. They're called textures, and VMT files themselves are called materials. Together they work to create, I suppose, content, texture, whatever you want to use to describe it. So to create VMT file, just open Notepad and type vertex lib generic, open bracket, base texture, and this is going to be the path to your model, sorry, not model, but that texture, which is VTF file. And I'm not sure, to be honest, but I think the path starts with root directory of Gmod or its material. So let me show you. I think it starts not from here but from here. So wherever your model texture is located from this moment is going to be from this path. So you need any folders you create here need to be put in the path. I think, I'm not sure, not 100% sure on that. So in my case it's ALS example model brick 01. Yes, that's it, that's fine. That's literally the bare minimum you need to create a texture. Without this it's not gonna work, without this it's not gonna work. Anything else you add is just gonna improve the texture or make it worse, whatever, depends how you make it. So brick 01 VMT. Just a note, the name of VMT file does not have to be the same as VTF file, but it does need to reference VTF file correctly. Save, that's done. So now we have created a texture. This can be used in models, maps. Oh yeah, but in order to use this for maps, you need to change the shader to, I think it's called light map generic. I'm not too sure, you have to check that on Wikipedia. So yeah, that's done. Let's try to go through the second possible way of creating textures, which is Photoshop plugin. Yeah, so let's go to Google, type VTF plugin Photoshop, names tools, Nemesis, archive, okay, download. Now we have these files basically. Go to Photoshop. Just a note, I have some weird Photoshop version. Yeah, portable. Sorry. So my structure, all the folders are a bit different. But for yours, you should find the root directory of Photoshop. That's not it. Photoshop. Yeah. Basically, you should find a folder that looks like this. Photoshop X. That's the main folder for Photoshop. And I think that's for all Photoshop versions as well. So to install this, you drop VTF lib DLL file to the root directory, I have it already installed, so I'm just going to replace it. And then install the second file into plugins, file format. Same story, replace, that's fine. So just fire up Photoshop. So open your raw texture, drag it in, whatever. Just not to create, like I'll have to create two VTF files, but not to have them same identical. I'm just going to modify this to something interesting. What looks nice? I suppose red, the mirror's edge style, something like that. Yeah, that's fine. Looks interesting enough. Save as. Oh yeah, so now we have VTF extension, so you can save straight as VTF file. This plugin actually allows you to open VTF files as well and edit them straight away, which is also cool and saves time. So I'll go materials and let's example model brick 01. We'll call it 01 pink. Oh, sorry, red. It's not pink. VTF. Yes. Template. This basically allows you to set compression settings. So uncompressed, it's gonna be much bigger size. It can go over megabytes. Compressed will be smaller, but a bit worse quality. But to be honest, like involved in Source Engine, I never noticed loss of quality because of selecting this. Sometimes I use this, but in most cases this is just fine. Okay, you shouldn't modify this unless you know what they actually mean. Materials, ALS, example model. So we have it. That's it. We have two. So I can't be bothered to rewrite the VMT file, so I'm just going to rename it. I know I mentioned these two don't have to be the same name, but I prefer to keep them the same name if I want to edit them in the future. 01 red. That's it. You have to create two textures. Also worth mentioning, you can use one VTF texture but with two different configurations. So basically you can create two materials from one VTF file. When Source Engine is looking for textures, it's not looking for this at all. Like you could put this, you can hide it, like I don't know, you can do this like hidden, whatever. It's not gonna look for it. This is what matters. It's gonna look for a VMT file. So as long as there's like, I don't know, 5 VMT files, they could be all linked to one VTF file, but with different configurations, like shiny, like specular. Sorry, I can't spell that word. So I'll just use shiny. You can use Fong, I don't know, bump maps, whatever. So I'm just gonna create one for the sake of tutorial. I'm gonna call it brick02, and yeah, we'll use the same, and we're actually gonna make it a bit shiny. So env map, that's environment map. It's similar to, like, this is gonna be used when you use cube maps in mapping. Like when you create in map, you create cube maps and then you build them in game. This is what's gonna matter. So this is just saying env map is cube maps, and tint is how strong the reflection will be. So I like to keep it under 1, like 0.2, 0.3, so it makes a bit shiny, not super high, whatever. So that's it. You have created. We have 3 textures and just two VTF files, and it's just gonna work fine. Except this one's gonna be a bit more shiny. So that's it, I think, for this tutorial. The next tutorial, like, I'm gonna make in 5 minutes. We'll start making models. So see you there.